Dogman versus Wolfman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I got your response to my first email, and I appreciate that you have your way of doing things. I promise that this story has never been on anyone else's show before, and I ask that you just please read this email on the show as it is, without changing anything at all. If you do want to change it, then I don't want it on the show. If you're okay with this version and read it as I wrote it, then you can use the story for free and have the rights and all the other stuff that I can't remember. Just because I have to make this anonymous doesn't mean I want the details changed around. This is kind of scary to talk about, but I want this info out there. Consider it an anonymous confession, sort of. My brother I'll call Rico got me involved in a weird cult, a werewolf cult right here in America. They had come to the Midwest from the West Coast is what the rumor was, but I learned early on not to believe anything told to me about any of the werewolves. Not all members of the cult were literally werewolves, but the leaders were, and the point of proving loyalty to them was to convince them to allow you to transform yourself. It's okay if you need to tell YouTube this is fictional or whatever, because I'm talking about literal shape-shifting from man to wolfman, and I know that's not recognized as a real thing by Western medicine or science. If people choose not to heed my warning and to think werewolves are not real, that is their prerogative. I would ask you to at least accept as a fact that there are cults out there in the world who believe strongly that they can and do shape-shift. There are cults who literally believe themselves to be werewolves, and I don't mean that in a poetic sense. My brother almost reached the graduation point, almost literally became one of them, but something strange happened at the beginning of Rico's ritual of transformation. We got visited and interrupted by the Dogman. No, not another werewolf. I mean the Dogman. Traditionally, werewolf cults have steered clear of turf belonging to the Dogman, although a werewolf is a shaman or wizard who makes himself like a Dogman. He is not a Dogman. He is a werewolf. He is capable of returning to human form again later. The Dogman, however, is an upright walking canine animal. It's not supernatural or paranormal. It's not a shapeshifter, and as far as I know, it's not a wizard or a brujo. But there is bad blood between the werewolves and the Dogmen, and I am not privy to understanding exactly why. Rico thinks it's because the werewolves take the form of the Dogman, and yet somehow project this attitude of being better than the Dogmen. The werewolves are like college kids dressing up like the tough kids from the wrong side of the tracks to try to look cool. They may be cool compared to the other rich kids, but not compared to the actual kids from the wrong side of the tracks, see? So, when it came to be the night that Rico's ceremony took place in the woods, it was Rico, this ginger girl, and this black guy. The three of them were going to be sort of anti-baptized, and they were going to have the secret revealed to them of how you become a shape-shifting werewolf in the first place. I was taking part in the ritual, but I wasn't going to be able to see anything from my place in the ceremony. So the ginger girl went through her ritual, and I could hear her screaming, but I couldn't see her from where I was. I could see my brother and the other initiate, and they could see the ginger girl, and judging by the looks on their faces, something really nasty to look at was happening over in her direction. I could hear the girl screaming, turn to moaning, turn to whining, and panting. And then she stood up, but she was not herself any longer. She was a canine, some sort of wolf woman, although her reddish fur gave her the appearance of being a humanoid fox. She did not look foxy, though. This was not like the movies. She looked as one might expect someone to look after a painful physical transformation into a different kind of being. She looked shocked. She looked surprised, overwhelmed, humbled. She also looked a mess. and the remains of the clothes she had been wearing were in tatters. Her extremely long dog tongue hung out of her mouth as she panted, desperately trying to catch her breath. She looked more canine than human, and that pup was in need of a doggy bath. It was my brother Rico's turn next. I looked over at him, and he looked like his face was turning green. He looked seasick, and like he was having second thoughts about this whole thing. I was too. I wanted to grab my brother and run. I didn't want to be part of any of this any longer. There was the sound of a disturbance on the far side of the gathering, in the darkness where I couldn't really see. Rico could see, and he looked pretty surprised. He and the other initiate backed up, away from whatever was approaching, and soon screams erupted from several places at once, and I saw my brother's eyes searching the crowd. I expected he was looking for me, so I waved my hand. He gestured in a direction, and the two of us took off to the right, away from the screaming. When we caught up with each other, I started to ask what was going on, but my question was answered by the terrible sound of multiple canines forming out of what had once been human beings. I saw man after woman after man transform in front of my eyes, which is not something that you can really ever get used to seeing. It is both explicitly, biologically, specifically happening while you watch, and yet the entire thing seems hallucinatory, magical, and impossible simultaneously. My brother grabbed my shoulders and redirected my attention to the huge, 15-foot or taller, giant behemoth shaking the ground with each of his footsteps. That was not one of us. That was not a werewolf. In spite of the fact that I was in a werewolf cult, I did not know for sure that the Dogman was real. That Dogman certainly was. He looked like a man, and he looked like a dog, and he looked like a dinosaur at the same time. His claws were even longer than those of the Wolfmen and women, and his behavior was far more feral and savage than these highly educated and pampered werewolves could ever hope to be. We wolf people could take the form of an animal, but we remained people. That Dogman never was and never will be a person, and he never will have any motivation to become civilized. He has no sense of morality. He has no sense of ethics. He just exists to tear flesh apart and sink his teeth into pools of blood. He's a Dogman. He exists to kill and to eat. The thing is, more and more of the crowd were in the throes of changing into the Wolfmen. I had only known that there were 3 actual shapeshifters in the cult, but I saw 6 or 7 people partially or completely changing into upright walking wolf people. There was gonna be a slaughter when they finished changing. They were all gonna gang up on that lone Dogman, in spite of his great size and sheer ferocity. My brother whispered in my ear that we should stay back because the fight wasn't gonna take long, and we were gonna easily win. Then, almost as if on cue, out of the woods behind the giant Dogman swarmed well over a dozen other figures. By the light of our bonfire, I could see that although none of them were much larger than the average man size, all of those figures were Dogmen and women, just like the 15-footer that seemed to lead their charge. We were the ones who were gonna get slaughtered. We were gonna get wiped out. Even as those thoughts formed in my head, my brother Rico was already pulling me out of there. We ran. We ran to a vehicle. I don't know who it belonged to, but it had the keys in the ignition, and we drove off with it. Well, Rico did. I just sort of sat there stunned in the passenger seat, watching the devastation as we drove away. It was the most horrible scene I'd ever experienced, and it kind of tripped me out more than a little bit. I remember sort of giggling and saying, "It's a dog-eat-dog world, Rico." It's a dog-eat-dog world. I laughed in a joyless way somehow. I'm not sure if you even know what I mean. Usually it feels good to laugh, but this time it felt sad. We drove to a bus station and then we traveled, and at least so far we've avoided that cult. We don't even know who survived the war with the Dogmen, if anyone. Rico says the werewolves had no idea that the Dogmen were so organized, and that's why they were so unprepared for that attack. I continue to be stunned over the savagery of their brutal destruction of the werewolves that I witnessed with my own eyes. I couldn't understand why the Dogmen were so threatened, and why they hated the Wolfman so much. Rico and I consider ourselves lucky each second we remain alive. We hope that the cult is okay with us not wanting to be werewolves anymore. After all, the Midwest is not a very good place to start a werewolf cult. The Midwest is the home of the Dogman. Our executive producer is Nancy Sears. She makes us grin from ear to ear. Her kind donations dispel fear. Thank you too, dear Nancy Sears. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Nancy Sears, who made this episode possible. You too can become a Scary Stories executive producer and help us stay on the air. You want to see secret uncensored stories available nowhere else? Then listen to what Henry has to say. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.